think happy.
Hello random person, Sab Nino here. SpongeBob was a show with little to no continuity. But now since the spin-offs have happened, now they have continuity when they feel like it. Sometimes this leads to rewriting stuff that haven't changed in years, sometimes they retcon stuff early on, but let's take a look at what I consider the top 10 SpongeBob retcons. Number 10. Squidward trying a Krabby Patty. Let's start simple. I'm sure we all remember the episode Just One Bite, where SpongeBob tries convincing Squidward to try a Krabby Patty after admitting he never had one. But did you know in the episode Your Shoes Untied, a bunch of Krabby Patties launched into his mouth? I'm sure some could make the argument that he didn't get a chance to taste them, but that's a lot of patties. I'm sure he could have tasted one of them. Number 9. Patrick's sister. In the episode Something Smells, Patrick reveals one of the first pieces of lore relating to his family. The fact that he doesn't have a sister.
If my sister finds out, oh wait, I don't have a sister.
Less than a decade later, Big Sister Sam would contradict this by introducing his Big Sister Sam. But even this got retconned, because in the Patrick Star Show, even though Sam makes cameos, the only sister Patrick has is Squidina. They also retconned his parents, but we'll get into this in the next entry. Number 8. Main character parents. I already mentioned the retcon of Patrick's parents and went more in depth in my top 10 of characters we'll never see again, but Patrick isn't the only main character with redesigned parents. Squidward's mom was introduced in Fools in April, then was redesigned in Krusty Towers, but this design was used for Granny Tentacles in the Patrick Show, so they redesigned her again in Momageddon, plus introduced his dad, which is a retcon of the book Hooray for Dads, where he was first introduced. But after Momageddon, they tweaked his design and personality in Jeffy T's Prank Emporium. Speaking of the book Hooray for Dads, however, this book introduced Plankton and Sandy's dads as well. But in season 11 Surf and Turf, they retconned Sandy's dad and introduced her mom. I will say the redesign was much better. Then they retconned this family photo in Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. And these are the designs they use moving forward. In season 13 Something Narwhal This Way Comes, we got our first introduction to Ma Plankton. But this was just a copy-paste of Ma Angler from Trenchbellies. But in season 14's Blood is Thicker Than Grease, we see a redesigned Ma Plankton, and Gordon Plankton was shown for the first time in the series. And those are the designs used today. I'm sure that was a lot to take in, but I thought it was fascinating that not one, but 4 of the main characters had family redesigns. Is SpongeBob next? Number 7. Karen. In Plankton's first appearance, Karen was just an analyzer. As time went on, she slowly became more involved until the season 3 premiere, where she gets introduced as Computer Wife. After that point, they started fleshing her out, but due to her not fully being realized when the show came out, this led to some retcons whenever they mentioned her backstory. For instance, in Friend or Foe, Karen said back in those days she was a security system, but her and Plankton were on their 3rd date. Plus, when did her mobile design come to fruition? The one with no arms. I know the one with arms was introduced in season 5 Mermaid Man vs. SpongeBob, but was brought back in season 8. But then Camp Coral retconned Friend or Foe since Karen was a computer assistant, but they reused this design in Plankton the movie, but retconned even that by having them be childhood friends that Plankton rebuilt during college. But her arms didn't get introduced until season 5. How does she have those? Karen makes my brain hurt, but I don't think anyone is meant to think as hardly as I'm thinking about it. Number 6. SpongeBob's house. In Truth or Square, SpongeBob got his pineapple via a boat, but in the Patrick Star Show it showed his pineapple under construction. But if he doesn't live there initially, why was Patrick fumbling up the SpongeBob theme song?
Lives in the severed head under the sea.
What makes this retcon even more confusing is that after this episode, in Friendiversary, they showed the Truth or Square origin. This wouldn't be too confusing if SpongeBob just found his house in the Patrick Show, but it's the fact that in Truth or Square, the pineapple just fell. Not only is that confusing, but how his house was built. In Home Sweet Pineapple, it was grown. In Truth or Square, it came from a boat. In Home Sweet Rubble, it was canned. And in the Patrick Star Show, it was built. I think just like Karen, this wasn't something that was meant to be thought about this hard. Number 5. Christmas. In Christmas 2, Sandy teaches SpongeBob about Christmas. For a while, this was how the gang was introduced to the concept, until the spin-offs happened. Because in Camp Coral, Santa tries giving gifts to the campers, causing Sandy to explain why Santa isn't a monster. This is fine, they implied that this is an alternate timeline, but there's no explanation for the Patrick Show, which already has Christmas. Remember, the Patrick Show is a prequel set when they were teens, so I don't know how they know about Christmas unless Sandy told them off screen, but in Christmas Who, they are clearly adults since it's the main show. Number 4. SpongeBob never being late for work. This will be brief. But in Season 5, SpongeBob has this weird pattern of never being late for work. In New Digs, it's implied that SpongeBob has never been late for work up to that point.
I'm late. What's Mr. Krabs gonna say?
But in Season 1's Hooky, he was 15 minutes late.
SpongeBob, you're 2 minutes late.
To make matters even more confusing, in Black and Sponge, Krabs stated that he was late for work.
SpongeBob is 13.5 minutes late for duty.
Which is fine since it was already established that he's been late in New Digs. And he was also late in Whatever Happened to SpongeBob.
He's already 10 seconds late.
But in Spongehenge, SpongeBob said he has perfect attendance.
I have not been tardy one time in my career as a fry cook.
And mind you, all of these Season 5 episodes are in chronological order. Why were they so fixated on SpongeBob's track record and whether or not he's been late? I chalk it up to simply an oversight, but it's weird how nobody on the crew caught this. Number 3. Mr. Krabs and Mrs. Puff's relationship. I'm sure we all know about the episode Krusty Love, where Mr. Krabs first asks out Mrs. Puff. At the end of the episode, they are together. Though I will mention, Mr. Krabs stole Mrs. Puff's hair curlers in Life of Crime before this episode, which is a nice nod to the episode, intentional or not. But in Season 3 through 9, they don't act so lovey-dovey. In Summer Job, the two even act awkward over the thought of going out on a date.
We should go out on a date?
Interesting. No, I had something else in mind.
Plus, to cement that they weren't dating, Mr. Krabs married Plankton dressed up as Kashina. Which means Krabs and Plankton are canonically married, you can't take that away from me. But in Season 10, Mr. Krabs said that they'd been dating for 16 years. But if that's the case, then how long was the breakup period? To be honest, I think it would have made more sense if they just got back together. But that's some of the issue with the show, is mostly zero continuity. Number 2. The Krabby Patty secret formula. In Friend or Foe, we got our first in-depth origin of how the Krabby Patty formula was made. Plankton and Krabs made it together, and eventually split apart after a fight. During said fight, Mr. Krabs perfected the recipe via some ingredients falling off the shelves. And the rest is history. However, how could this be the case if an enemy-in-law, Eugene, told Plankton it was an old Krabs family recipe? To make matters even more confusing, Plankton the movie also retcons Friend or Foe, by having them not meet as kids, but to discover the Krusty Krab after failing to dominate the world. You could say, well, Friend or Foe is one episode, so it makes sense why they'd retcon this. But no, this was canon for a good chunk of time, because in Season 8's The Other Patty, SpongeBob brings up Friend or Foe, stating that they were palsy wowsies once. Things get more confusing once we get to the number 1 spot, as we got one retcon so bad that overthinking could cause serious head trauma. But before we do this, let's discuss some honorable mentions. SpongeBob knowing how to tie his shoes. In Your Shoes Untied, SpongeBob has forgotten how to tie his shoes. But in the late Season 1 episode Rock Bottom, he knew how. SpongeBob having siblings. In multiple instances, such as Copy Bob Diddlepants, SpongeBob states that he always wanted siblings.
I always wanted a twin brother.
But in an old Nick Magazine comic, SpongeBob has nephews. And nephews can't happen unless you have siblings. I left this one out because according to Vincent Waller, this comic is non-canon. Patrick's traumatic backstory. In Big Sister Sam, Patrick reveals his depressing backstory after being abandoned at the surf with his sister as children.
Sam took care of me when I was just nursing on Coral.
But how can that happen when the Patrick Star Show has proven that he had an at least decent childhood? King Neptune. People would be mad at me if I didn't bring up that movie redesign, so here we are. Long story short, Show Neptune and Movie Neptune are completely different in design, voice, family, and personality. Squidward having no happy memories. In Are You Happy Now?, Squidward states that he has no happy memories. But in multiple episodes before and after this one, he is shown to have some before the papier-mâché ripping. SpongeBob knowing what Vikings are. SpongeBob wears a Viking hat in the theme song. Fun fact, this is the first time they retcon the opening. He also knows what Leif Erikson Day is. But in Dear Vikings, he has the audacity to ask what a Viking is. And the number one SpongeBob retcon is Camp Coral, SpongeBob's Underyears. Look, I think Camp Coral's a decent spinoff, and I didn't mind the inclusion in Sponge on the Run. But if you really think about it from a timeline perspective, it makes the whole SpongeBob universe crumble. Let's first talk about the squirrel in the room, Sandy being involved. In Kitchen Sponge, they established that Sandy went back in time to stop the Krabby Patty formula from being discovered at camp. Plus, in End of Summer Days, Sandy didn't join SpongeBob on the bus for the sake of the timeline, which worked until Creepaway Camp, where it is shown that Sandy did in fact go to camp, and nobody acknowledged the timeline fix. So what was even the point? Also, her stopping the formula from being discovered creates a plot hole too. In Enemy In-Law, it's a Krabs family recipe. In Friend or Foe, Krabs and Plankton created it together, while here, SpongeBob created it. Plus, Krabs and Plankton are acquaintances in the show, which also retcons Friends or Foe, since they started off being enemies as kids. Mr. Krabs also met Mrs. Puff with the Krusty Krab in the main show, but they worked together in this. They also retcon how other characters have met too. SpongeBob and Patrick met Craig Mambleton in Sunbleached. SpongeBob met Patrick as a baby, but in Sponge on the Run, it implies they met at camp. Squidward met SpongeBob as an adult, same with Mrs. Puff. Even Mr. Krabs running the camp makes his backstory even more convoluted. Since how was he in the Navy, a pirate, and a camp master all at the same time? I almost mentioned SpongeBob and Gary since in the show, he got him at the animal shelter. But Tom Kenny himself brought up the possibility of first meeting at camp, then adopting him, which is completely valid. Even Camp Coral is a retcon of Camp Coral, since the show and its appearance in Sponge on the Run are completely different. Plus the roles were different too. Squidward's a kid in the movie, but is a teen in the show. Plus his glasses are given to Sandy, and Mr. Krabs was a chef, which they do actually pay attention to in the short I'm Urging You to Leave. And even though this was scrapped, I'm pretty sure Plankton was meant to be a kid due to some promotional images. So the moral of the story is don't think about Camp Coral too hard. Or SpongeBob in general, because especially nowadays, it can really hurt somebody's head. I hope you guys enjoyed this list. I don't hold most of these against the show, and mainly did this as a fun analytical video. Are there any other retcons I missed? Are there any that you find unforgivable? What about ones that I was too harsh on? Comment below. And as always, it's all Sab from here.